Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. So, today we are talking thriving versus surviving for high achieving women. Let me go live on Instagram as well. So, I'm Andrea Swanner. I am the founder of Andrea Swanner Consulting. I'm a business consultant and business strategist. I focus on supporting passionate women with heart-led missions in the coaching, speaking, writing, and mentoring spaces. I pride myself as the strategist supreme, a thought partner, and I really love to have clients who have missions that I can get behind. I'm really excited to talk with Amber today. I did not really know what a high achieving woman was. A couple of years ago, I was part of a summit and there was a speaker that came on who supported high achieving women. And I asked her, what is a high achieving woman? And she asked me a few questions and she said, well, you are a high achieving woman. So, been wearing that title around for a while, and really with starting my business and familial pressures and societal pressures, and my kids are getting older. I'm about to be a grandmother. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that out into the universe, but I am about to be a grandmother. I have a 6-year-old. My husband has started his own business. I have this business that I'm running in addition to another business. I do business locally as a notary, an insurance inspector, and it's a lot. It's a lot. So, Amber, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and talk about your expertise and all of those amazing things that make you Amber. And then let's dig into today because there's so many things that I want to talk about with you.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know all of that about you, so I'm like, woo, it's a lot. So I'm Amber Posey, and I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, family nurse practitioner by training, and moved out of the clinical practice world into the larger word is coaching, right? But I call myself a modern day medicine woman, midwife to stories, because I still do the same work in a lot of ways that I've always done, which is to really support particularly women who are high achievers. My background was working with eating disorders for a really long time. So that kind of is like the highest end of somebody who's turning their high achievement against themselves. And then if we look at that spectrum into sometimes people who are just having a hard time managing stress, which would be a lot of high achievers, right? So just you talking about it, like overwhelmed, tired, stressed out, and also not willing to sometimes get support to delegate effectively because, like, I gotta do all the things, right? And so I had some similar experience. I was never, there's also the overachievement model, right? Where I was never like an overachiever, but I was definitely a high achiever. So I tended to be very focused on the things that I liked versus many things at a time because I kind of knew that much about myself. So it's really kind of exploring how does high achievement help you and how does high achievement at times harm you, and what can you do to find more embodiment so that your sense of accomplishment feels good from head to toe versus achieving just to achieve, which is what the societal parts can kind of create problems for us, right? So if we identify ourselves as a high achiever solely, when we are in moments of needing rest or pulling back from all of the things, we might start having poor self-esteem, a sense of poor self-confidence. And also, what really led me to do more of the coaching is working with burnout. So my own burnout, which I never saw coming, came. I was really good at creating a lifestyle business where I valued my time, valued my fees, valued the kind of work that I did. And so I really didn't see that coming. But I really had a struggle with, like you said, the societal aspects. Every client I had was barely functioning when kind of COVID started kicking in. Even before that, we were starting to have more and more discord in society, disillusionment. And so instead of having a variety of clients, it felt like everybody was in a crisis. And what I found was a lot of helping professionals the last few years, we've all been really overwhelmed, disillusioned. And if we don't notice how that's tied to our own identity, we're going to get worse typically versus improve. And so it's not just the systems that need to change, it's really our relationship with ourselves so that we can continue enjoying high achievement and accomplishment for the sake of we love what we're doing, but we're not doing it for any sense of proving who we are and really just truly putting our focus and energy towards that which enlivens us, enriches us, supports others, much like you. I like to support people who are heart-led. So mission and purpose matter. And when you're very passionate, when you're somebody who's done something tied to purpose and meaning, you actually have a higher risk of burning out than people who have a little bit more separation from their work purpose and their life purpose being combined.
So you said something that I want you to delve a little bit deeper into: high achievement versus overachievement. How do I know as a high achieving woman whether I am a high achieving woman? And I nearly said just a high achieving woman, because I already know which one I am. But how do I know if I'm a high achieving woman or an overachieving woman? And how can I really, if I identify as an overachieving woman, how can I really tone that down so that it doesn't start causing burnout and I don't start spiraling?
Well, I think even your question is interesting because we don't necessarily have to tone down things, but what we want to do is be in our bodies and notice what's happening. So I tend to talk about a season and harmony more than I talk about balance. I tend to think the work-life balance is a bit of a myth, and so there's harmony in life.
Okay.
It's just like most things. So when we have babies, when they're an infant, to pretend you're going to have a balance of like a 10-year-old child, what they're sleeping on their own, they're much more self-sufficient, that would be silly, right? So there's a higher need in infancy. Let's just say normal development of a child. So no special needs, just what we think is what, say, a normal development of a child. The infant is always going to require more than the 10-year-old in some ways. Let me just clarify that. So you want to pay attention to the season, and the season of your life. What I notice for most women is when they're younger, high achievement doesn't seem to create as much of a struggle, because in a lot of ways we're moving towards what we could call the top, right? So there's a desire to ascend, there's a desire to achieve and to really hit your peak. And then what happens is usually in midlife, depending on, again, let's just say standard kind of development of humans, you start thinking like, all right, I've hit those accomplishments, what else? And so if you keep on like the sense of growth just for growth, you can be sure there's an overachievement versus growth, reassessment. Where do I want to be? What is my body telling me? Am I changing? What is my interest? Am I able to let things go without feeling like I'm failing? And what I would say is most high achievers have really strong identity of achievement equals worth. And so therefore, when you make changes, the letting go is very hard. Very hard. Because there's a sense of like, well, then who am I? And usually, if you're high achieving, you look like you have it all together. So no one wants to have an identity crisis, right? So then they tend to hold on to more, add, versus learning how to let go slowly, let go of what you want to let go of. So you can have, again, that discernment and that clarity of what actually draws you forward. So pulls you forward versus push. So most high achievers have a push energy, and that will wear you out, will burn you out. And overachievement is typically, because what I would say is when you settle in, you're going to still be someone who loves to accomplish and achieve certain things, but it's less of tied to it's who I am, but more of choice, because you're becoming more and more aware of your larger self, not just this kind of narrow view that our society tends to promote. Is that helpful?
It is. Let's talk about this that you just brought up, letting go versus quitting. I have a daughter who is involved in And in each of my daughters, I have a son, but in
Okay.
each of my daughters, each of my 4 daughters, I see pieces of me. And in one particularly, she's definitely a high achiever. She taught herself to play piano. She's plays the drum. She plays percussion. Is amazing on drums. She was in dance, and she was involved. Like she's A-B honor roll. Only made 1B this past grading period. Very immaculate in the way she carries herself. I'm not bragging on myself. I'm bragging on my daughter. Very immaculate in the way she carries herself. But at some point, once she got so busy in school, I said, we really need to let go. We need to let go of some of these things. What is it that you want to let go of? She decided to let go of dance, even though she was amazing. And when I was talking to my mom about it, my mom was like, oh my gosh, you're raising a bunch of quitters. Why'd you let her quit? Once she got into it, she needed to pursue it. Like to what end though?
Yeah.
Quit because it's easier for mom, have 5 kids. It's easier for mom if we let go of that one thing because she wanted to pursue other things. So let's talk about letting go versus quitting, because even when I talk about that, like I feel it in the pit of my stomach, like, oh my gosh, did I let her quit or did we let go?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you just brought up your body awareness, because what I would say is it's paramount is your body awareness to what's going on. And so, not to make this an experiential per se, but you want to assess in your body, what do those words do for me, right? Letting go, quitting, my mother's opinion, society's opinion, fear of not providing grit for my child, right? Helping them with the grit. And so it's really nuanced, first of all. And then the other thing is, it made me think about, I've been talking to a lot of strategists, because I always think that, strategy is so important, and it's not that important until you're really clear. And I think this is why you and I talked, and we said,
yes,
well, it's really important. Like you said, you met all these like high achieving women. You're like, why aren't they ready to move forward? I was like, oh, because they're about to like lose it about what's really about to happen when they make these changes. And they're not surely, though they look like they can do it, they're having a lot of doubt about what is it that I want, and again, identity. So I talked to this one strategist. She's like, oh, is that you're working with whiners? And I said, no, they're not whiners. They're people who are really, like, they're so determined to be precise, to be, like you said, I think of the word, one of my clients, she loves the word of having, blanking out all of a sudden, poise, right? They really want poise. They really want presence. And the problem about really wanting poise and presence, if it's not embodied, that it's truly where you want to be, it will feel like performance. It will create anxiety, and it won't be as heart-led. It starts becoming mind-led, which puts you at risk for more perfectionism. So high achievers and perfectionism, procrastination, all these things can go hand in hand. And so it's really learning how to, like, doing the work of really kind of pulling out one at a time. What are the threads that have created some of this? Because if it's not truly a heart-led desire in the long run, again, this is, let's talk a little bit more about midlife versus a younger person for a second, because midlife, there's a sense of you've kind of overcome some of the obstacles. Generally, you've gone through college and you've gotten through classes that you don't like because you see the end result, right? So you're willing to do some of the things that are not as ideal because you're big view. So that long view helps you in high achievement. However, there's also a sense of what's in the here and now. And to me, in the here and now, you get into your body very quickly to know, like, is this fear? Is this, again, societal pressure? Is this trying to perform for others? Or is this really what I want? And generally, when we have like too many tasks ahead of us or interests, and we're not devoting a lot of time to any of them fully, what may happen is that part of you that wants to be good at everything actually starts feeling too stressed to be as wholehearted in your endeavors. So you want to think about if you're truly embodied and you're truly passionate. So like I don't mean to say hyper, but you generally are like a multi-passionate human. High achievement tends to have the multi-passionate kind of energy, right? Entrepreneurship fits that model because you're like, I have all these ideas, I can kind of do it this way. There is a sense of like, can you really nourish what is needed and spend the time and energy, which means you have to, in some ways, pull back from what the pressure of society that you may see, that you may feel from society, but actually is internal, and say like, what is present for me now? So I can give you an example for me. I want to say build a newsletter, and I want to be on social media more. And the old me is like very used to not being online, right? So all of my work was not online. And so there's like this pull between like, well, I did really good work before I was on social media. And I did, all these things that were really rewarding. And I want something new. So there's a little bit of, that's like expanding my boundary a little bit versus is it that I have too much where I can't be focused? And so for me, it's like, how do I expand it, but also regulate my nervous system? So if we don't regulate our nervous system, which is what you're feeling in your belly, your throat, your heart, our nervous system isn't regulated, we're just performing. And it generally is more of an anxiety response instead of like, I'm feeling maybe energy to show up. So it could be butterflies, right? You think about performance on a stage.
Mm-hmm.
But it's aligned versus I'm pushing through friction and stress and pressure to do something that I don't actually want to do anymore. And I'm afraid to say I'm pivoting or I'm changing.
So one thing I have noticed about that is, before we came online, we talked about, nerves and jitters. And I don't feel that nervousness anymore like I did in the beginning. I tend to be very introverted as a strategist, as a consultant. Like I'm the person that's behind the scenes. I analyze what's going on around me. That's just what I'm best at. That's what I've always been best at. But when starting this business, I knew that I was going to have to be more public and be a persona, essentially, to meet people, find business, find clients, talk about my expertise. And I really had to be pushed to be out there. I really, really had to be pushed. And the first few podcasts that I guested on, the first interactions that I did, coffee chats, like they really drained me. And I could really feel it like in my back, sitting very erect, like muscles very tight. Mm-hmm. And then immediately afterward, I would go and I'd have to go and take a nap and sleep for a couple of hours. And that's what I have noticed about myself, that when I put myself in a situation where I'm not thriving, like I need rest, I need sleep afterward. So I've grown. I realized that this isn't a performance. This is actually something that I enjoy. And I've even said, I don't think I'm going to do any more podcast appearances because it takes so much energy to put on the act. So it's exactly what you said. Like I was performing. I was performing when I was doing my first few virtual, and I've done hundreds of coffee chats at this point. They just really drained me. But now, like, I enjoy meeting people. I enjoy hearing people's stories, developing relationships, sharing my story. And it's not a performance. It's something that I thoroughly enjoy. It's something that I thrive on. I enjoy it. I enjoy the energy. So if I'm a high achieving woman and I am wanting to pivot from surviving to thriving, what would you say are the first steps in identifying activities that I really should look at letting go of or changing up even?
Well, I wonder, for me, it's hearing the way you're posing that is just like, I should. So first of all, that's one of the first things we would look at is where, like people say shoulding on, right? They like, you're shoulding on yourself. So like, what's that like to should constantly?
I've never heard that, but I like it.
It's like a funny, I think it's a cute little play on words, right? So shoulds, have tos, must, needs. So I was thinking, I popped in a quick little video before I came in, and so this is making me think a little bit about, I think people think thriving is easy. And I think thriving is, it becomes easy, but it is not easy, because what's happening is the survival game, high achievers are good at winning, if you want to use that term, in like the stick culture that we live in, right? The hustle culture and like the bro culture of like, you gotta win and hustle. High achievers tend to be really good at playing that game. So they can do it from the good girl model, or the good guy model, or they can do it from the rebel model. They can do it either way, but they do it. And what happens is when you hit a level of, I'm going to use accomplishment for a second, because there's high achievement, and then you hit accomplishment, right? So if you're just a high achiever, then you would be striving. So you have strived, you have kind of landed something. You then surpass in that category, let's just say your career. And so you kind of put your attention to other things. So you keep on having this like very linear, it's a very quote masculine model. It's usually like it's the heroine, it's the hero's journey. And I tend to talk about the heroine's journey a little bit more. So the hero's journey is very vertical, it's very conquering, and it's very push energy. And it feels good. Like, I'm not going to lie, it feels good for most of us to kind of feel like we can surpass something. But it's again, it's not a season in life. It's not generally how you want to live your whole life. And so part of that is analyzing, like, whose journey am I on? Am I on my own journey, or are some of the values being kind of inside of me that are not actually mine? And so again, this is really it's complex and it's nuanced, why generally you want support with an individual for your own particular needs versus just like hearing about this. But
okay,
whose journey are you on? Whose values are you living? What's your why? And knowing part of your past is important so that you can actually get to the future that you want, versus pretending like you're just this character with no background. So that's the part that you want to have some trauma awareness, if you're going to use the word trauma awareness, in that all humans have dealt with something that can be upsetting to them and the way we work. So high achievers tend to be people who are like, I'm not going to feel helpless. I'm not going to feel disempowered. I'm going to get things done. And that's great, because that is a very empowered way to be. However, it is not the full story. And so what happens is you want to definitely start looking at, like, if everything is must, should, could, need, have to, there's not a lot of room for choice. There's not a lot of room for pleasure. And there's not a lot of room for presence. There's a lot of room for to do, not being. Mm-hmm. And so a healthy human who's thriving is being and doing simultaneously. It's a dance of both. You're not pushing yourself. You're, again, pulled towards life. You're pulled towards that which draws you, not pushing. So I talk a lot about the warrior. If you know about yoga, you know the yoga move of warrior. Are you familiar? I do more Pilates than yoga. True, a high achiever I am. I like Pilates a little bit more than yoga, but I love yoga for presence. And in the warrior move, your hand, I'm going to just show you here. You go out this way, and you have it receiving, and you lean and you put your knee, you're squatting towards that hand usually, and your other leg is straight, and then the leg that's under your hand is going this way with your hand. And the thing that makes it a tolerable exercise or move, and that's not the right words for yoga, but a practice, asana they're called, so, or asana, is because you're in a receptive mode. You're not pushing. And so if you think about that as a warrior, it is to really learn how to receive versus push. And so it's really a call to kind of go into yourself. So an inward journey. So the heroine's journey is considered an inward journey, so that you can really deepen in, and this is not gendering, it's not all genders. will have a hero's journey and a heroine's journey as they create a larger life. If it's just a hero's journey, that's like the very Western culture, very, as you said, a persona. And a fully developed human has both. They're not just living in a bunch of masks. They are fully embodied. And what I think is happening with society right now is more and more, particularly women as leaders, are saying like, this isn't working. I have to be a mother. I have to be, the profession that I'm choosing. But more importantly, I have to be a human so that I can enjoy this work, or all I am is exhausted. And so, again, it's receptive, and it's saying that my feelings matter. Now, we're not going to only make decisions from feelings, but we do want to check into our bodies. When I say feelings, sensations matter. So we know what's going on. We're giving ourselves kindness to then make the move. And so you will have, like you said, with going from a more introverted space to a more extroverted space, you're going to have what people might say is fear. I said energy about like butterflies because I try to neutralize that. I'm actually not scared of talking, but I'm not used to having people watch me when I talk on a conversation, right? So
Right.
even if, and I didn't enjoy stages when I was younger, right? Like I didn't enjoy being on the stage. I was like, I don't want to do a speech, but I certainly had a lot to say. So it's a sense of like, it's energy. It's the energy that's not used to being expanded. So if you can change the words up a little bit, it helps. But also, if it is fear, not making that a problem and saying, we have fear and we have courage, we do things because we care about ourselves or because we care about the mission. We don't necessarily say, I'm going to just not do anything, because that would be more of a quitter, but more of a, okay, what can make it more enjoyable for me? So you saw I had tea. I'm going to sit here. I want to have tea, right? So you want to be physically nourished. I like to have, green in my view when I'm working. If it's certain music, right? Things to make yourself in your body feel comfortable so that you're able to expand into your next challenge. And so as a human, you're going to have challenges. That's the nature of life. So you're picking as an entrepreneur, when you choose to be an entrepreneur, particularly in your kind of like your, what I call the messy middle of entrepreneurship, you usually started your first business, and that tends to be very easy for high achievers. Like guaranteed. They're like, I'm transferring this from employed to that. Like it's not that hard. The challenge is when your vision gets bigger and your creative energy gets bigger and you're stifling yourself or you're letting yourself get bored, I would say you tend to start getting burned out, not just from overwhelm, but because you're not letting yourself really expand into your true direction. And
Okay.
I don't know where I was going next. So
yeah, you're going somewhere. Let's keep it going down this track. So I identify with everything that you just said, and I have found that when I am involved in an endeavor, I'm just going to call it an endeavor, whether it's starting a business or, I've had all of these like, oh, I'm going to get a real estate license. Well, I'm bored with that. I'm going to move on. Well, I'm going to start a business. Oh, that business is doing well, which is what happened with my craft business. It started doing very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm bored with that. I told my husband I'm ready to move on. He's like, oh no, you're not moving on. This is the money generator. You're not moving on. You're going to continue to do this. And so 4 years later, I still have my craft business. But that business allowed me to step away and start this business. But once it really ran the route and I accomplished all of the dreams and ticked all of the boxes that I'd set for myself, I was ready to move on. And how I'm involved now with this business, which is something that it's very endearing. I really had to pivot my entire journey, like go from corporate after all of those boxes were checked in corporate. I didn't want to move any further there, but like, I didn't want to quit. I didn't want to quit that. So like how, as a high achieving woman, can I stay true to myself, true to my mission, and continue enjoying my mission as an entrepreneur? Do I continue creating challenges for myself within, or not necessarily challenges, but yeah, I love challenges. And I always say that I love challenges. Anything that sounds challenging, I'm going to be on board for it. And maybe that's why I picked this model, because I get to meet with so many different women, learn about different journeys, help them in different aspects. It's always something new. Even if I serve two women who are both health coaches, like their journeys are going to be very different. Their business needs are going to be very different. And that's what I love so much about this, being able to meet so many different needs. But if I were in a position where that wasn't a thing, but it's something that I really enjoyed and didn't want to give up, what is your advice to me as a high achieving woman that once the boxes are checked, the achievements are met, how do I stay fulfilled within that journey?
Well, I think that you have a lot in there. So what I heard was your larger identification is you're creative, which so the reason why I call my business the creative artist, because what's really happening is you're serving creativity up, and you're in the high achievement model of typically corporations. And so I tend to work with high achievers who are in a professional model, which is a little bit boxed in, who don't know they're creatives or are creative, and the creativity is like running its course in the way that they've done it. So, and so I can use myself as an example. I wanted safety and security. I wanted to be able to make 6 figures working part-time. So there was a component that was like very practical. And I loved having client work because of what you just said. Like, I love each person, even if it sounds kind of, like I said, I work with high achieving women, they tended to be moving towards entrepreneurship with, and this is like as a psychiatric provider, this is like me not picking the kind of like client that I stay in when I work with per se. Like, I'm working in, this is like when I'm an employed person, I'm just drawing in high achieving women almost always. And then it's like more and more, I'm kind of niching into this, right? That I work with high achievers. And they almost always were always becoming entrepreneurs or really moving up the corporate ladder pretty quickly, right? So I just realized, like, okay, that's the person that I naturally really like to work with. They can be similar, but they all have different journeys. And so it interests me because it's very unique, custom. And it matches the part of me that loves many businesses, but also loves my life to be simple. So if you like a simple life, if you want to have like 18 different businesses, that's not very simple. So it matches the part of me that vicariously gets like, that's a cool thing, and that's a cool thing, and right. So I get a little bit of that without going to get the real estate license, without getting the, not getting the LLC started for the next business, but like being able to help. So the part of it is like, generally, if you're kind of describing the creative process, and then a high achiever, if we're going to make these kind of assumptions right now, right, if we're going to do a little bit of a stereotype, creativity is essential, and that drive for perfection or precision is the healthier way. That over perfectionism can create more problems, and then there's precision. So you kind of want to work with precision. You want to be like, all right, how do I turn perfectionism healthily towards what I want? And it's called precision. So you have a precise eye, a precise taste, a precise preference. And that's usually the difference between somebody who starts having a lot of mental health struggles versus somebody who doesn't, is they really know how to use that critical precision towards an object, not towards themselves.
Okay.
So at the same time, you could be doing that in one part of your life, and then you could be doing something in a different part of your life where it starts getting a little bit more perfectionistic. And again, society is always talking about balance, like, oh, like I gotta get perfect right now. And so if you have that precise desire, you could get overly kind of perfectionistic about everything, and then you are no longer thriving because you're trying to get everything in this like made up fantasy of perfection. The other thing is you could be really good at doing it. What I would say happened with me was I was like, holy crap, I just created my perfect life. Like I did everything, I hit all the boxes. Like, and I was like, I did it easily, and I didn't really do it with a big. I'm very intuitive with my strategy, with just enough structure. And I was like, how did I do that? Right? Like, because I just did what I did. It felt very good. It was intuitive. My strengths were involved, my interests. I do believe desire and pleasure are a very important way to handle living in a thriving world versus a striving world or a survival world. And so I do tend to believe in you need to have desire, you need to have passion, all of that. But the struggle for me was like, well, I want to create more, but I don't want to scale. And I don't necessarily want to. I really loved psychotherapy. So I thought like it was the end all be all calling. And so it's more of like, I might have to venture into this thing called coaching, which, I don't know about you, but you do probably know that coaching has a very interesting industry. And I was like, I don't think that's ideal either, right? So it was really just kind of learning to pivot the way I wanted to do it my unique way. So what I heard you say was like, what's the how, and kind of like say it's this and say it's that. And so it's custom. So it sounds like you know how you work. And if you don't know how you work, that's the first struggle. And if you don't know your own values, that's another struggle. That's the bigger struggle, actually, is if you don't know your own values. If you don't know how you work, and if you're not willing to let go of what everyone else says is the way, and so your way has to be what I often say is like, you put your nose to the ground and you sniff, like there's like an animal part of us, for all of us, that you want to access being in your body and kind of let your intuition guide you when you're further along versus when you're a newbie. Those structures of traditions and systems and organizations tend to help us because it's the A student. The A student is always an A student because they know what to do to get the A. And as you're getting more embodied into yourself as a woman who wants to be accomplished, but also really enjoy the life she's created, not just like work or perform for performance sake, not be driven by pressure and distraction, it requires a healthy level of intuition and merging your knowledge that you've formed over the years from structures to have a little bit more of a dance with creativity. And like you said, you didn't want to let go of the craft business in that it was creating a good level of income, but you did have to decide, like, how can I do it where it's still enjoyable, where I still have that passion? Because if it's like nose to the grindstone, I'm not going to enjoy it, even if it's a craft, even if it's something I want to love. And so I don't know how exactly you did it, but you figured out, here's what's going to work. Here's probably what I can automate. Here's what I might need support with. Here's what's my newest interest, and I'm going to put more energy, discernment, precision over here, because that in some ways already runs itself pretty well. And so there is a sense of, again, being in your body, and though you have a relationship with your partner, like he said, like, hey, how about you just don't cancel the whole income thing? You also were like, sure, and I'm drawn to this. Like, so how am I going to do, right? And so there's a natural kind of fluid dance, but thus the harmony that's necessary. And generally, you want to create a self-care like that. Now, that word gets overused, but self-care is unique to you. And it's, how do I nourish myself? Do you pay attention to cycles? Are you somebody who, generally women are better at cycles than paying attention to cycles than men are because of our bodies with cycles. But a lot of women I've worked with in high achievement don't even know about their period. Like, I'm like, well, what's your period cycle like? Where's your energy? And they're like, huh? And so I'm like, well, if we don't even know how our bodies work, right? So kind of reclaiming, how does your body work? What kind of food works well for you? How is your sleep? What are your relationships? What are your beliefs? Like, all of that, so you can really firm foundation of like, and now what do you want to create? Because really, entrepreneurship is creator. It's not, it's creating something from nothing, even if it seems like you said, two health coaches, the health coach world is this. But what is your version? What is your vision of coaching? What is, and so for me, like, though I can say I have coaching, it's very important that I talk about being a modern medicine woman, because I combine all of my medical knowledge, I combine all of my psychotherapeutic knowledge. It's not that I'm doing coaching just to help people make more money. I love helping them make more money the way they want to make more money, but that's because meaning matters, money matters, having a sense of magic for you matters. But if it's just money, you'll be miserable. If it's just magic, like, oh, I have this magical life, but you're poor, not generally sustainable. If you're just full of meaning and purpose, you tend to be a bleeding heart and you definitely burn out. And so it's really, again, like truly getting to know yourself. And again, thriving is, they say, new level, new devil. So you move from surviving and you're good at the game, there's a lot of deconstructing of like what got you there is not going to keep you generally in a thriving phase, because it's usually that kind of hustle mentality, dog eat dog competition. And thriving is healthy collaborations, healthy sense of mentoring and being mentored, spending your money on things that are actually true return on investment, not just, again, what people say is a return on investment. That's all what matters in thriving. And it's a different level of functioning, and it does require introspection, a sense of contemplation, and saying, like, I'm in charge of my time and space, which means I'm actually in charge of my time and space as an entrepreneur. And if you let the demands of business or social media or a client that's not an ideal fit kind of work on you instead of choosing things, you're not going to find thriving. To be honest, you would much more likely enjoy being employed, most likely, because it's usually easier to create boundaries with employed people than it is for self-employed people. Self-employed people have a lot of boundary work to really enjoy their lives.
So everything that you just talked about, I've experienced. You were answering the question based on what I had asked you, based on my experience, but it's all been a journey. Let's see. 8 years ago, maybe even 9 years ago, if you had, I mean, I never would have guessed that I'd be sitting here as a multi-business entrepreneur. I never guessed that, like, back then, I thought self-care and wellness was going to the doctor for my flu shot and my cholesterol check once a year. That's what I thought wellness was. Self-care, like, yeah, I go and get my nails done.
Always nails.
Yeah, I get my nails done and my toenails done, but like, I thought that's what self-care, and once in a while, maybe a massage, that's what self-care was. And I wouldn't have identified as a high achieving woman. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I would have just said, well, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm following the path that's there. I'm living the American dream. That's what I would have said. So, and all of those things, it's really been, it's like I'm looking into a mirror and seeing who I was versus who I am now, like we're two like Alice in Wonderland, and it's really been quite the journey. I've grown so much, and I've run into other women that are just starting that journey. So I want to ask you, and I wrote this down, I have it in my hand so that I'll remember to ask, because I feel like this is a very important question. Even now, as a high achieving woman, how do I know when I need help or when I should seek out help with managing the demands, whether it's I'm an entrepreneur and a mom and a grandmother and a wife and I need help with those demands, whether it's mental health or what have you, or if I'm a physician and I need help, because I've been seeing a lot of posts on physician suicide. And
Mm-hmm.
like, so how do I know when I need to seek out professional help, and when I'm not thriving, when I'm surviving, and when surviving is really taking the life out of me? How do I know when I
Yeah.
need help?
So, what really started this whole journey for me was my own burnout. So I work in depth psychology. So there's a sense of they're called initiations that we hit. So we're hitting thresholds. And they usually are not the most pleasurable when we have these initiations, but they are always growth oriented. And so when I decided to kind of support people who, I tend to work with people who are in burnout or wanting to prevent burnout, and when they're different. So we've been kind of talking about maybe like noticing who you are. I think I wrote on a post in LinkedIn about the amount of female physician suicide is skyrocketing. And so when we think about a high achieving female, a physician can come to mind, because we generally think like, the highest level of education, the highest level of responsibility, and they're female. And a lot of female physicians are, declaring what's happening with their friends and with their own sense of needing to heal. And then if you're in a helping profession, you generally do tend to overgive as an identity. And again, it can keep us away from the part of us that feels helpless. So helpers, often our core wound is we have had moments of helplessness that we did not fully feel, or what we can call metabolize when we were younger. We just we just did things. So there's a level of, in trauma response, there's this concept of fawning. So there's fight, freeze. Fawning can be one of those as well, where this is the good girl model. So overachievement can be tied, not always, but can be tied to some trauma responses. And when I say trauma response, all humans have normal traumas of being a human in a very big world. It doesn't have to be the acute traumas that some people associate with. And the more high achieving you are, usually the more you don't think you've had any problems. And when you start having problems, you can feel a lot of shame, because you're like, well, compared to this poorer person. I mean, if you look at our society right now, like if you do the comparison game, you may never get help, because as you can see, our society is heartbreaking. So if you don't let yourself feel the heartbreak for yourself, your own pain, you have higher and higher risk to get depressed. And when we don't get depression taken care of earlier versus later, the side effect, right, the worst side effect of depression is suicide. So I worked in mental health for almost 20 years. I have a very big heart for what that can turn into. And at the same time, what I noticed is that high achievers, especially who I worked with in eating disorders, they weren't coming in voluntarily. They were coming in voluntarily after they were in higher levels of care and their life was falling apart. So I worked in outpatient as well as inpatient. And when I moved to outpatient as a private practice, they were voluntary, of course, but they weren't voluntary like because they wanted to thrive. They were voluntary because they literally hit the brick wall. They hit the rock bottom. And if they wanted to do the work to thrive, they had to be very clearly, there's a willingness that you have to have about like, what is it that I'm going to face? And it's not easy for humans. So what you want to do is, if you can, be open to, where do I need support? Humans are interdependent. We are not independent. We have moments of independence. We are not just dependent, though we have moments of dependence. We are interdependent. We do better with support. And generally, this idea of high achievement is, especially in the American model and Western society, it's a very individualistic, independent model. And we can do well until we don't. And if we want to do better, if we want to move forward, if we want to make changes in our own lives, for families, for people we love, as well as larger society, there's generally a need for support. So because I worked in psychiatric care, I had a psychotherapist that I was doing supervision with the whole time I was a therapist. It's kind of the standard for the type of therapy that I form. So if you work in psychodynamic, it's kind of odd to not do your own psychotherapy. There's a part of you that knows, like, if I'm going to be on this side of the couch, I got to be on that side of the couch to understand. So psychotherapists who have a concept of like, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm just exploring who I am, that tends to be the easiest with somebody who's willing to get support in the helping professions. But even us, when I say us, meaning psychotherapists, we all don't sometimes see how much we're starving ourselves, how much our soul hunger, how much soul burnout is happening, because again, you're kind of busy living and you're busy saving. Even if you say you're not a savior, there's still a lot of that. And so women, where you're culturally kind of predisposed to overgive, try to save the day, do a lot, and it is existential depression can come from to that. So we call it burnout, but what I'm just writing a little bit about this for my newsletter, but like, it's a nice word to say you're really in existential depression. And so you want to get support before you're there, to be honest. You want to get support. And it doesn't always have to be paid support, but generally you want to have support of somebody that you can fall apart if you need to in front of, and be able to be a messy human so that you can also create something bigger when you're ready. And again, paying attention to seasons. So we just came out of winter. The earth has winter. We have winter. There's components where we just need to pull back. And so if you're attached to or addicted to constant productivity, if you think about it, if the earth always had constant productivity, our soil would be ruined, right? We have to have, the soil has to be taken care of. And so there's a need to nourish. You are not a machine, you're not productive only. Though we have amazing capacity to be productive, we really have to have humanity as the call. And humanity is tenderness towards ourselves, compassionate, creativity, having a community, having a sense of curiosity, learning to be centered. And you cannot do it, no matter how achieving you are, on your own. You just can't. So it's really learning, like, what do you need? I know when I started my own business, I was like, I had a psychotherapist for the part of like being a therapist for myself. So I kind of that was like standard support. And then I was like, I want to coach because I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I'm going to give myself the best return on investment, which is investing in myself. It's not investing in technology. It's not investing in a lot of things until you're ready. Now, sometimes we can do it all at once, depending on where we are financially. Generally, the more we're in the middle of our business, we have more financial resources. But for me, the very beginning of my business, I got a coach. I didn't spend my money on anything that wasn't tied to me first. So I tend to think entrepreneurs are a unique set of people. You don't have mentorship in your corporations when you're an entrepreneur the way you do when you work typically. And I would say in the helping field, we aren't giving mentorships. It's just like, get ready, go to work. Mentorship is really not existing in healthcare in a lot of ways when I was last employed. So there's a sense of get your own mentor. Sometimes it's groups, sometimes it's paid, sometimes you can have this with free resources if you've met certain people. And don't be afraid to invest in yourself, because if you don't do that, the likelihood is you may come up against some mental health or physical health struggles. And unfortunately, working in healthcare, when people are kind of, again, in crisis, we're trying to get them to basic survival. And then from crisis survival, we try to aim to thriving. But a lot of people walk out once they get to basic survival. And they're like, yeah, I got this. And so the thing about that is, if you want to create big things, you have to be willing to say, like, what am I going to have to let go of, and what am I going to embrace? And that's generally inner work. It's not just external work. And then usually when you're clear, I mean, part of why I said you and I met was like, I want to be able to say, like I tend to love strategy a certain level, but it's like, there are these experts and they're strategists. And when you're ready to pay them, they love supporting people who are ready to make moves. But when you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? like you're having serious identity struggles, generally that's not when you want to pay the strategist, because the strategist is not doing the coaching of like, for some people, I know maybe some strategists do, but my thoughts would be, we all want to do what we're best at. And so
Yes.
there's inner work, there's outer work, there's creating a sense of like, what does my life need to look like? And strategy is usually when you're very clear. And what happens is, I think a lot of people think we're clear, and then we spend money and we're like, oh crap, I'm not that clear. I think I told you I bought a course a long time ago about support, and I was like showing up not ready. And I was like, why did I spend that money? Because it's really not about, and especially if you're like multi-passionate, you're like, oh, I have an idea, I'm gonna go do it. $5,000 later, oh, maybe it's not what I wanted to do, right? And so there's a little bit of like, use your resources wisely, and also, do the work. I think all of us, our own unique selves, can be a professional, entrepreneur with our own unique strategy. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter if you trust that you are the difference. And so when you say, like, I had to put on a mask, that's the first sign, like, wait a minute, no. Like, even though this Joe Schmo over here is doing this amazing thing and I kind of like it, if you try to mimic, and they love extroversion and you have more introversion, it's going to feel like you're wearing a mask. And you're going to take 3-hour naps instead of enjoying the 30-minute, coffee talk that you were actually being yourself, and then being like, ooh, I have so many more ideas now.
Yes. Yes. That's it. You definitely hit it there. So we are right at our hour.
Yeah.
Amber, do you have any closing notes or advice for high achieving women that want to move from surviving to thriving? Would you have any suggestions, any advice?
Yeah. So again, I think it goes back to really exploring your values. And so you can, there's all kinds of online, there's something called a value sort. So this is a free thing that anyone can do. You can look up value sorts, and it has a list of like 80 values, and it's a little card game. You can cut it into cards, or you could just mark the ones that appeal to you. And if you don't know your values off the top of your head, and the sense of like, what are my values now? And part of that is a lot of us, again, who are in that high achievement model, have been very successful one way, can kind of get stuck in our identity, the role that we've been. And so, like, I would say one of my biggest values is compassion. Now that would work as a psychotherapist, and that would work as the modern medicine woman. But I'm trying to think of something where it wouldn't work. So part of it could be like your old role might really need a certain behavior that the new role actually is going to be a negative for you. Now, sometimes it's tied to your value and sometimes it's not, but it's really important to be present in the here and now. And where do those values come from? Are they my values? Are they tied to like older traditions that I actually don't align to it with anymore? Is there sadness about letting that go, right? Sometimes people are high achievers because they're trying to make their parent happy, and their parents passed away and they're still trying to get approval, right? And so it's like, where is that approval from? So values are really important, as well as, again, what interests me now? Because if you are an entrepreneur, you're generally much more creative, even if you're in a traditional role. And it's really important to keep your interest and your enthusiasm up, and not in like a positive psychology kind of model of like you're ignoring, some quote negative feelings, but just saying like it is important that you can have that passion. That is what brings people towards you. It's not just staying rote. And so what interests you? Are you willing to let go of things that no longer serve you? And sometimes it can also be like for me, it was like, well, as a psychiatric provider, it was like, this is it's an easy business. I make very good money. I work part-time. So it was like, am I willing to let go of some of that while I pivot? Or for me, it was, I really didn't want to have any new clients when I was making changes. And then it was like, well, I don't know if I want any new clients in this other field yet. I think I just want to have some rest where I'm having minimal work to really evaluate what I want. And that can bring up a lot of anxiety for some people. So again, generally when you're further along in the journey, you usually have some financial resources. But it still can bring up but money is, money, relationship to money is a big deal, even if you have enough. And sometimes the more you have, the more you can want to hold on to it. So there's a little bit of what do I need in the here and now? What are my values? Do I know how to take care of myself? Am I in my body? And what kind of support do I want so that I can move towards staying and thriving, knowing that thriving is a different feeling than survival, and it can bring up your survival struggles when you're moving there. So the fears and anxieties that come up from trying to survive can also come up in thriving, because again, what often happens is people feel like they're letting go something that they may have an attachment to, that is part of their identity. And so it can bring up am I safe? Am I secure? Will I still be liked? This happens with celebrities where they make a lot of money, right? And they have a fear of leaving people behind. And so that happens with people no matter what the level is. So if you're somebody who was, doing well and you're in this corporation, or then you move to your own business, I know for me, I felt like I didn't want to let anyone in the psychiatric realm, all of society, understanding I really believe in mental health. I didn't want to let any of them down. So it was keeping myself quiet, even though I had a lot of struggles with certain things in mental health, because I also have a lot of love for mental health. And so for me, it's been really being I'm serving more people by helping professionals get into their bodies and follow their heart, because that helps larger society than if I just help in my psychiatric practice. Because I know for me, I like to work intensely with less people versus a lot of people in a superficial level. So okay, I've completed this round of my business. Now what is my next one? And not feel like I'm abandoning. So I had a lot of my own inner work. I'm not abandoning mental health. It's just that I want to serve a different population of people who may never even get mental health help because they don't identify with struggling, but they actually have a lot of struggles. And if they don't address them, they could end up in the mental health world that has got 90% wait lists and is under a lot of pressure. And that stigma can kind of stop them from the support they need.
Thank you, Amber.
That's shaking your head.
You unpacked a lot today.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you've really unpacked a lot, and I didn't realize how much of a journey I've been on the last 8 years or so.
I call it a spiritual journey.
Yes.
Entrepreneurship really opens you up to your spiritual journey. If that's the path you choose, it will open you up.
Yes. And even 6 years ago, 8 years ago, I didn't realize there was a difference between being spiritual and being religious. I would have said, oh, of course I'm spiritual. I go to church every Sunday. I read my Bible. I love Bible study. I didn't realize that that they could be the same but different. I didn't realize that. So
that's that good girl in you. The good girl in you will follow the rule. But you also have that greater part of you. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Things were very black and white for me. Then I didn't realize how much gray there really was to everything. That's
also maturing. And as we mature, black and white typically helps us in achievement, but the gray is necessary. You can't live a life if you're not in gray.
I agree with that. I agree. And I love so much that you said that as entrepreneurs, we really don't need to try to take this journey on alone. That's something that it's a hard lesson that I learned in the beginning. I thought, it's my business. It's my responsibility to learn all the things, do all the things, know all the things, be all the things. And it really took me almost getting to the point of having a breakdown, like, okay, no, I need to bring in help. I need to bring in experts. Because yes, it is my business and I need to be responsible enough to know what parts I need to let go. So I really, really do appreciate you for saying that today. So Amber, once we end the stream, can you go into the comments and just leave information for people that want to get in touch with you? And I always get the question, will this be available? Yes, it lives on LinkedIn. You'll be able to find it in the LinkedIn theater. On my profile, it will be there. So you can read through the comments, rewatch it, get in touch with Amber and I on the comments. And Amber did just say she's going to go in and leave information on how she can be reached. Thank you so much to everyone that joined during the live stream. I see that several of you stuck with us the entire time. Thank you so much. I hope that the information was helpful. If you have any questions, please get in touch with Amber or I. Or if you're rewatching, thank you so much. If you have questions or comments, make sure to drop those down in comments or send those to Amber and I. And Amber, thank you so much for being my guest and being so open about your journey and so willing to answer these questions. I appreciate you immensely. And to everyone that's watching, have a very happy Tuesday or Wednesday, wherever you are. And I'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Andrea.
Yes, thank you.